begin. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. Everyone can rest assured Lucy is back. She's feeling better. Is that fair to say, Lucy?
Definitely fair.
Okay, good. We're very excited to be sitting down with Bill and Gail today. We're going to be talking about the Marsden Hartley Legacy Project and the Memorial Collection at the museum, which is a really cool thing that we have. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves first real quick?
I'm Gail Scott. I am an art historian. I've been working at Hartley for a long time and other things as well along my path. So I'm very excited to be doing my first podcast.
Yeah.
I am Bill Lowe. I'm the curator at the Bates Museum and am coordinator of the Marsden Hartley Legacy Project. So helping Gail with the Legacy Project.
Yeah, and you've been working at the museum since...
This is my 30-something year.
Wow.
At the museum.
I thought it was something like that, yeah. So longest tenured museum staff member, so pretty excited to be talking to the both of you.
Yeah, and I've been working with Bill on and off on other projects for many years, so we're old friends.
Nice.
Yeah. And just as an aside, I had never heard of Marsden Hartley, really. I mean, I'd heard of him, but I wasn't familiar with his work before coming to Bates and the museum. So it's been a amazing experience to be introduced to his work, learn that he is from Lewiston and has such strong connections here, and then get to know his work and get to learn about Gail's work, and so it's been great.
Yeah, I also knew nothing about Hartley. I hadn't even really heard the name before I started working here, so it's been great to be learning about him. Why don't we start there? So who's Marsden Hartley? Give it your best shot at it.
Yeah, well, Marsden Hartley was born in Lewiston, Maine, in 1877 to English immigrant parents who had moved here to work in the mills primarily, at least to begin with. He was the youngest of 8 children and is known for being a lonely child. His mother died when he was 7.
7 or 8.
And that was very difficult for him. His father moved away a couple years later, remarried, and moved to Cleveland, and Hartley was left with his older sister in Auburn. And so he worked in a shoe mill in Lewiston and eventually moved to Cleveland to reunite with his father and stepmother, and then eventually was recognized for his artistic talent and came back to New York to begin working or learning there.
Yes, and then on and off throughout his life, he traveled broadly everywhere. He was kind of an itinerant person. He never owned his own studio. He would go to a certain place like Santa Fe, New Mexico, and either stay with friends, or he would find, boarding houses to stay in or hotel rooms in New York City when he was there. But finally, for a whole number of reasons, came back to the United States. He would off and on be back in the United States, but he came back to Maine. Mm-hmm. And the last 7 or so years of his life, he mainly worked in Maine and died in Korea, Maine, the little fishing village down east, in 1943. He's part of what is known as the group of American modernist painters who were mostly discovered and promoted and exhibited by the famous art dealer Alfred Stieglitz.
Right. So
his artist colleagues in that, what they call stable of, Stieglitz's stable of artists, as though they were horses, were artists like George O'Keeffe and John Marin, Arthur Dove, Max Weber, and Hartley, as both of you have said, a lot of people just do not recognize the name of Marsden Hartley as they would recognize the name of Georgia O'Keeffe. Okay. So he's not the household word that some of those other artists are these days, and that's kind of part of what our mission is to make his work as well known as any other of the Stieglitz artists and make it accessible to people.
Right,
So.
yeah.
Yeah, as you say, he's not as recognized as some artists like Georgia O'Keeffe. What makes his work and his life so important and interesting, and why is it that we should be paying more attention to Marsden Hartley and really bringing him to the forefront of this period of artists?
Yeah, let me I'll say first, following up on Gail's explanation of the Stieglitz group, one of the things that made it so that Hartley was less popular, as it were, aside from the fact that he was an itinerant person and moving frequently in Europe and Central America and the West, Nova Scotia. He was constantly experimenting. He did not have a sort of a signature style like some of the others, Arthur Dove or O'Keeffe or Marin, whom you recognize immediately. And I think that made it difficult for him to be successful as a popular artist, because his style and work kept changing throughout his career.
Yes, and it also is often, except for maybe some of the still life paintings, his work is rugged and just not as easy to enjoy in terms of a painting as one would enjoy looking day after day at a Georgia O'Keeffe. So as Bill said, he is an experimental painter, and he was never satisfied with the pretty scene in front of him. If it were a landscape, he just really would struggle with the landscape and create something that was not necessarily pretty. So his work is challenging, and I've always loved that about it. I think he's coming into greater recognition for exactly that unique approach that defies the linear thread of a type of art that kind of looks like it's by the same person. He really just was constantly seeking. He was a seeker.
Yeah. So part of what made his work difficult for some to enjoy during his lifetime is exactly one of the reasons, at least, why his work is so interesting to us now, because he was experimenting broadly, both with representational art, with abstraction, with spiritual work.
Yeah, and I mean, you've been speaking to getting into kind of what his actual works look like. Is there a particularly favorite kind of work that speaks to you, or one that you sort of particularly connected with among his oeuvre?
Well, since this is an audio podcast, it's sort of difficult to.
And I'm sort of tantalizing people.
An audience to. I'm not sure that anyone would, recognize the name of a painting, but I guess I will say he is probably most immediately known for what's known as the German officer paintings of the World War I era, 1914-15. So those are very powerful abstractions. They're not non-objective. They do have recognizable symbols and numbers and various insignia, that kind of thing in them, but they are a signature group of paintings of his because no one was doing anything like that at the time. They were really unique, and unfortunately, he was doing them during World War I, and when he got back to the United States, German art or anything related to Germany was not a popular subject. So
I wonder why.
these very innovative paintings, kind of were not really appreciated until much later.
For me, I would Hartley did a series of paintings several years earlier, when he was first exploring Western New England, the Western Maine and New Hampshire, the mountains. And there are several of those paintings, the is it the Hall of the Mountain King, and the like, that are just exquisitely jewel-like paintings that are both beautiful representations of the natural world, but also symbolic of the things that he was reading at the time, Walt Whitman and things like that. So,
and then I'd go to the end of his career for my all-time favorite, Hartley's. A work just sold at auction and was purchased by the Wilczek collection called Musical C Notes, and it's three little shrimp and three little seahorses
Oh, yeah.
against a black murky background. These pink and white little creatures, and it's just the most whimsical and exquisite painting that we will be so excited to have in the Wilczek collection, which maybe that we'll explain more about that later, but they have a close relationship with the Bates Museum. So
Right, yeah. I will link any of these that we're referencing down in the comment section. So if you want to look at these images, we won't be just purely talking about images without showing you. Yeah. So.
that's great.
So this question is sort of going to lead us to more information about the Marsden Hartley Legacy Project. But, how does the memorial collection exist in the museum? What is the role of it in the museum? And really, how did we begin to acquire these works? What was the process for that like?
in his lifetime, Hartley expressed an interest in having works of his in a collection in his hometown. As a young man, he felt that he had missed the opportunity to see great artworks, and really felt that Bates College was a place where that can happen. And even in the late 1930s, he was talking to people at Bates about taking all of his main paintings. Unfortunately, that didn't happen.
We wish. Yeah.
But after he died, his niece, Norma Berger, who was his closest confidant and closest relative, made sure that a number of things from the estate came to Bates, and that includes Hartley's personal library, archival material, keepsakes, ephemera,
his palette, and brushes and tools,
antiquities, ceramics, again, the library, and then several years later donated 99 drawings. So the museum, this is in the mid-50s, so the museum at the time, and still has the largest collection of Hartley's drawings anywhere in the world. And what we've come to learn more and more as the collection has become an important resource for scholars around the world, is that the combination of artwork and his personal effects really give insight into the artist, not just as a personality or his psyche, but really his as a broader person. And it's been wonderful to get to know the collection here at Bates. And it really was the initial collection for the museum and remains the core of the Museum of Art's collection here, guiding acquisitions in works on paper, modernism, American art, and things like that.
Yeah.
And I would add that his personal library, I guess I can't recall the actual count of books.
I think it's 180 books.
180
Oh,
books.
wow. Yeah.
It's an astounding collection that reveals so much about him. He was, in addition to being a painter, he was a poet and an essay writer, an essayist. So the books in that memorial, the Hartley Memorial Collection, reveal so much about his interests, and his interest in philosophy and in mysticism and in spirituality and in other artists. And it has been a resource for me all along because I first published a volume of his essays and a volume of his poetry. So to understand what he was reading and how it relates to the essays or poetry that he wrote has been an immense resource for me. So it's another gem in the Marsden Hartley Memorial Collection at Bates.
Right. I suppose that kind of, and also, it ties right into, you guys have been doing research as part of the Legacy Project for Hartley. I wonder if you could speak to sort of what the Legacy Project is, and you've also already kind of started to speak to the kind of research that you can do with somebody who's this, itinerant artist who's
Right.
traveling around quite a lot. What's it like doing
Yeah.
research on someone like that?
It is interesting. I first became acquainted with Hartley's work in a broader way, other than undergraduate survey courses. When I was beginning my career and saw one of the major exhibitions of his work way back. So on and off throughout my career, I've worked on Hartley, and there have been two attempts really, at what's known as a catalogue raisonné, or complete inventory of Hartley's work over the years, over the decades, really. And I just recognized how important it was to finish that project, to make that happen. And I had some initial funding and was working alone for a good number of years when it became clear that I really needed this project needed an institutional home. And with some negotiations with the Bates College Museum of Art, that happened, and Bates has now become the home of what will be an online inventory of Hartley's entire body of work, his visual work, his paintings and works on paper. And then so that in addition to the Hartley Memorial Collection will be one of the richest resources for understanding the work of Marsden Hartley anywhere. And so we're thrilled to be working on this project. Currently, it is a cloud-based inventory of his work with a provider called Panopticon. So Bill and I work in our separate offices. We have another employee who's based in New York, Charlie Parsons, who can work on the database from New York, so it's accessible to all of us. And then when the 650 plus works are all properly entered into that database, we will turn it over to a web designer who will design the website, which will then be housed and sponsored by the Bates College Museum of Art and accessible publicly to anyone who is interested in exploring further the work of Hartley.
Yeah, I'll just back up a bit to say that as the home of the Marsden Hartley Memorial Collection, over the years the museum has done numerous exhibitions, symposia, lectures, and projects with the Hartley collection, as well as often with the help or participation of Gail. So we've had these conversations for some time, and we're really lucky that Bates agreed to do this. So it's a grant-funded project.
Right.
We're funded by the Vilcek Foundation of New York, and the Raymond J. Horowitz Foundation for the Arts is another major funder of the project. And so yeah, that's been a great thing to begin. We're now in our third year, at least actively. Gail's been working on this a lot longer. And I would just add to what her description of the catalogue raisonné. My role currently is in image procurement. Our researcher is working on provenance.
Yeah.
It's the ownership of all the works.
Everything needs to be traced back to the artist. So all of those works need to have some connection, clear connection to the artist to be considered. And then there's also all of the references. So all the exhibition histories, publications. It's a huge undertaking and important because Hartley is the one really remaining artist of his stature to not have a catalogue raisonné. So many of the other modernists or American painters of significance have had these catalogues raisonné done before. So we really feel that Hartley is overdue this honor, and it's an exciting project to be involved with.
And one of the exciting things about this research is discovering works that were either lost, whereabouts unknown at the current time, present whereabouts unknown, or never had been recorded but are genuine works by Hartley. And we have a link on our current one-page description of the Legacy Project that's on the museum's website, that anyone who thinks that they might have a Marsden Hartley can submit an application for it to be considered by us. And through a couple of different avenues, including that submission process, we have discovered unknown works, or works that have been lost. And I can't tell you how exciting it is to a lot of what is submitted is not by Hartley, and it's not what anyone would expect Hartley to have been painting. But occasionally when an application has come in and I see the image, I'm just flabbergasted, because there is something that I know, off just without too much further research, that it is by Hartley. And one of them was a very small painting done early in his career, and there was a sort of a vague record of it from the past. But when this person submitted it, she gave the history of the ownership, and as soon as she mentioned the name of the family, Pollier, I think it was, I knew immediately that because this family had owned quite a number of Hartleys. And then she told me the story of how they befriended Hartley, and they promised him early on that they wanted to, this is like 1910 or so.
Okay.
Yeah, way back. That they wanted to buy a painting of his a year or a month. I forget the frequency of it, but they were so thrilled with his work that they wanted to support him in that way. And I had never known that story. So, when these things do emerge, it's pretty thrilling.
Yeah. So you said like a stockpile, like a family sort of mini collection.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought this up. I was going to ask you about, I know that you encountered a work recently, right, by Marsden Hartley called Friends Against the Wind?
Yes.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about what that process was like finding it, and maybe what you did immediately after you found it. How did you go about researching the work? Did you already know about the work? Did you have to put this in the context of the rest of his work? How did you really approach it?
Well, that one, I did know about it. I only had a black and white image of it. It had never been reproduced in color. But it had been in an exhibition catalog of Hartley in Nova Scotia. And so I knew that the subject was a memorial to the two sons of the people that Hartley stayed with in Nova Scotia in 1935-36. And I actually knew the name of the owner, Peter Sheldon, but I didn't know where he lived.
Right.
I didn't know anything about him. But somewhere I came across the fact that he actually lived in Windham, Maine. And I did just your Google search. I found a number of listings for Sheldon's in Gorham. I called numbers that came up on the Google search, telephone numbers. I wrote a letter, and I never got any answer. So I was kind of, oh, well, that one's got to go by the wayside. Maybe I'll never find it. Anyway, at some point, I was contacted by an estate attorney in Portland, Maine, who had this work by Hartley, and it was in a vault in a key bank in Portland, Maine. So I immediately made an appointment to go and see it. So I finally saw it in color. Anyway, that was another thrilling discovery. We still do have a lot of whereabouts unknowns in our inventory. Gradually, they emerge. Another one emerged last week at an
nice.
auction house in New York at Swan Gallery. It will go up for sale soon. And I only had a black and white image of that as well. So gradually they emerge out of the woodwork, and some of these have been owned by collectors for decades and never exhibited, kept very privately in their homes. So that's why they are, kind of unknown until the owner decides to do something with it.
Yeah. Right. One of the nice things about one of the interesting things about the Legacy Project and getting the word out there is that then we hear from people who might be interested in having their work included. And even in the process of going to museums and institutions seeking imagery for the works that we have, just last week, a museum in Florida ended up having, in addition to the one painting that we knew of, they have 2 drawings that Gail had never seen before. So there are things getting revealed all the time. So it's actually really, really exciting.
I had been to the Norton Museum in 2016 to examine the one Hartley painting that they had. These 2 drawings were accessioned, were accepted as a gift that same year, but our paths crossed. I wasn't there at the time.
Right.
I was there just prior to the accession, I guess. So I'm only finding out about them, and they are totally unknown to me. They are not in any other inventory. So I am eager to hear about the ownership history on them. I still don't know, but they are pretty clearly genuine Hartley drawings, beautiful drawings.
Yeah. So having the Legacy Project, the website or the resource completed, will provide opportunities for scholars to continue research on Hartley, but it also amplifies the collection that we have here at Bates and raises its significance, or at least the attention, its contribution to understanding Hartley better.
Yeah, and I'll say that Hartley became interested in collecting these little antiquities. He didn't have a lot of money to spend, but so none of them is terribly valuable, I don't think. But he would trade work of his for some little object that he saw in a antiquity store that he loved. And one such painting that I was just reviewing recently, he exchanged for a Chinese statuette, which is probably in the memorial collection, and I haven't had the opportunity to figure out which little object it was that he traded a painting for.
Wow. Well, I think that brings us kind of into the sort of like final sort of takeaway here. We've been talking a lot about Hartley and his legacy, and I'm sort of kind of wondering if you could, to sort of tie a bow on things, like what do you think Hartley's legacy means today, and kind of how can that connect with the Lewiston community, local community, the Bates community, where we're housing these objects, and kind of what your thoughts were on that.
Sure. Well, just and I guess following up on what I just said about the combination of the Legacy Project and the Memorial Collection here at Bates, there are ongoing opportunities for exhibitions, research, lectures, and symposia here. We just, as you may recall, did an amazing exhibition, Adventure in the Arts, with the Vilcek collection,
right.
And that is scheduled to tour starting next year. So those kinds of opportunities for not just the Bates Museum, but for people interested in Hartley and scholars interested in Hartley to learn more about him and to, again, raise the awareness of Hartley as a Lewiston native and Bates has a place where he is home. And so if you go downtown, I don't know if you've been down on Lisbon Street recently to the Hartley block, the new recently constructed apartments have two large mosaics on the street level that are copied after Hartley. So the Lewiston Public Library has an amazing early Hartley painting. So there's growing awareness and appreciation for Hartley here.
And I know that the museum does education outreach, and this is going to be a rich resource if the education curators or interns,
Me.
want to work with teachers to develop little study units, say, for instance, on a particular period of Hartley's work, and find some little object in the memorial collection, one of his ephemera pieces or a group of them that relate to paintings by Hartley that are either available physically because they're in the collection of the Bates Museum or online in terms of the Legacy Project and its resource. So that there will be lots of opportunities for that kind of educational opportunity for public school or school groups in the area, as well as art history classes at Bates itself or special projects that students might want to do.
That's a really great thought. That's something I'll have to talk with Anthony about very soon.
Yeah.
About getting that going. But, well, thank you both. Thank you both for coming on. This was a great conversation. I also want to thank Bill. Is going to be retiring soon as curator of the museum after, what'd you say, 32 years?
Peter, this is an inappropriate conversation.
Well, thank you, Bill.
Yeah, I will say thank you. I will say that because the Legacy Project is so important, I am going to be continuing working for that, even though I'm not working for the museum. So
yes, I don't want to lose him.
Right, exactly. And I also want to thank Lucy. At time of recording, she's about to graduate. She's put her head in her hands a little
Don't
bit.
make me cry, Peter.
But I want to thank Lucy for doing these first couple podcasts with me. It's been very helpful to be having somebody so talented working with us. So thank you both, and thanks again for recording.
Well, thank you, Peter, and thank you, Lucy, for giving us the opportunity.
Yes.
I think this is important, again, to get the word out and let people know about the Legacy Project. Congratulations to you both, and thanks very much.
Yeah, great.
This will be one more way for us to reach out to the send this broadcast.
Exactly.
A link to the broadcast to our friends and Legacy partners.
Most definitely. All right. Thank you so much.